Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. That's a jazzy intro. I like that. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the entitled Themed Entertainment Design Show. We have a very special episode here for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Very excited to be guest hosting today alongside my friend here, Rachel. I'm sure you've seen us around the network in various areas. But just to quickly reintroduce myself to our viewers, my name is Emily Lee. I am formerly the marketing specialist, sometimes host, sometimes producer at TETV, and I'm excited to be back here on screen here at Themed Experience Television.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be here guest hosting along with Emily. I'm Rachel. I'm one of the senior producers at TETV, specifically on Freelancer Showcase. I used to help produce this show, but now it's in the very skilled hands of Trevor and CJ. So, and thank you to Trevor and CJ behind the scenes. But really looking forward to having Jaclyn on today to talk a little bit more about what we have going for AAPI month.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have Jaclyn on. I first heard of Jaclyn's work when I was up in Toronto for my master's degree at Ryerson University. She's a great person to have on the show today talking about diversity and inclusion specifically in museums. And it's really cool. It's going to be really cool to get her perspective because she is the acting manager right now of inclusion at the Royal Ontario Museum, otherwise known as the ROM as well. So yeah, let's welcome Jaclyn into the studio. Hey.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. Enjoying this summery day.
It looks very nice and sunny.
Yeah. My apartment faces west, so I get wonderful sunshine this time of day.
Very nice. Yeah, it looks lovely. Well, welcome, Jaclyn. Welcome to TETV. Welcome to the show. We're really, really excited to have you here today and just learn a bit more about yourself as well as the work that you're doing at the ROM. So if you wanted to go ahead, give yourself a quick, or not quick, as long as you want to take for your introduction, and we can learn a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jaclyn. As you said, I'm the acting manager of inclusion at the ROM. Fairly new to the role. I took on the role in February. Prior to that, I was the coordinator of diversity and inclusion. So I kind of moved through various roles in the museum world. I grew up in the Philippines, immigrated to Canada with my family in 2005. I have a degree in business from the Philippines, a degree in English from the University of Toronto. And if I could talk to my 8-year-old self today and tell her what I'm doing, I don't think I would have believed it because growing up in the Philippines, I never really thought that a career in museums was a possibility. I never really thought a career in diversity and inclusion was even a thing. So, right now I'm in this job that honestly, it's my dream job, but it's a dream that I never really actually had until I got it. So I'm very, very grateful for all the opportunities that I've had throughout my career that's led me to this path. Very grateful to the mentors I've had along the way and to all the people I've worked with who've really, helped shepherd my career to where I am today. And also to all the community partners that I work with. As I guess a bit of background on myself, I started in museums as an administrative and visitor experience volunteer at a much smaller art gallery. And at the time, I took on that role as what I call my last hurrah before I got a real job in the banking or finance, something that my parents would have expected me to do, right? Something that's practical. As an immigrant, definitely something that will help my family build a life in Canada. And arts and culture, as amazing a career path it is, it's it's not quite as lucrative, let's say, as a finance career. So I took on this volunteer role at a smaller art gallery, just for fun, because I've always loved art. I've always when I moved to Canada, I was like, must be so cool to work at one of these places. So might as well just do it for fun. And I don't know how many years later, I'm still I'm still here. I kind of worked my way up from doing visitor experience and administrative work to managing their social media, working in their communications and marketing. Um, and then I remember very clearly there was this moment one fall when I realized that I wanted to move on from that particular gallery. And, thinking about my future, I wrote down a 1 year plan, 5 year plan, 10 year plan. And at the time, I was thinking, you know, my dream company, if I could work anywhere in the world, now that I've kind of gotten to this museum career path, where would it be? And it was ROM. One of the very first places, cultural places I went to when my family and I moved to Canada was the ROM. My sister, you know, took me to the ROM in 2006, and I remember getting, wowed by the dinosaurs. I remember just being awed by the overall grandeur of the place. If you've never been to the ROM, we have uh, four, four, 4 floors plus a basement, all filled with galleries. We have 30 different galleries, thousands of objects from multiple cultures. People think of museums, they usually think art museum or history museum. The ROM, I think, is unique in that we cover an entire breadth of topics. We provide exhibits and galleries and the 3 pillars of art, culture, and nature. So I always tell my friends if you visit the ROM, chances are you're going to find something that will resonate with you, whether it's a dinosaur, whether it's the dodo bird, or an object from your family's culture. And for me, that's what hooked me to the ROM. Is that when my sister took me here, um, she showed me to the Gallery of China, and the ROM has this incredibly large collection of Chinese objects, and I'm half Chinese. So, for me, seeing this entire gallery full of objects from my heritage, objects that reminded me of things my grandmother had, it was a piece of home in Canada. So I was like, this is where I would love to work someday. And back when I thought of it, I was like, yeah, right, I'm ever gonna work there. That's way too big. That's way too fancy, is what I said. But that fall, I wrote it down as my 5 year goal to get a job at the ROM someday. That December, I saw a job opening for an audience coordinator, which basically was a role that tracked visitor feedback to help the visitor experience team know how to better serve our audiences. And I applied. Why not? And I got the job. And the boss that hired me, Cheryl Blackman, was just an amazing mentor, helping me navigate the system and figure out the next steps in my career. So that's me in a nutshell. And what I do now as acting manager of inclusion is, I manage the ROM Community Access Network program, which is a network of over 100 community organizations across Ontario, um, of communities that are experiencing barriers to engaging with the museum. So, persons with limited incomes, newcomers to Canada, people who are disabled or deaf, all of these communities who historically, for whatever reason, may not have felt that museums were a place for them. And, as part of my role, I get to work with all these amazing community partners to make the ROM a welcoming and inclusive place. I also sit on exhibition teams to make sure that to advise on the visitor experience in exhibitions and make sure it's accessible and inclusive across various aspects. Um, and yeah, I'm there basically.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that you manifested that for yourself too. You said in 5 years I'll be here, and you did it. So that's really great. Congrats. I also loved part of your story. I won't speak for you, Rachel, but I feel like with a lot of first gen Asian American immigrants and things like that, it does take a lot of convincing, especially with our parents, with these more creative or unconventional roles. And I know, at least for myself, it took me a while to really explain thoroughly like what even like themed entertainment was to my parents, to convince them that this is a viable career path. So I really loved hearing that from you, Jaclyn. I feel like that's something we can all very much relate to. But very cool. And I mean, you say that you didn't expect to end up to like being within diversity and inclusion, specifically within your career path. And it's really cool to hear like how you started as a volunteer and then worked through these different roles. But with diversity and inclusion specifically, like what really sparked that inspiration for you to work within this specific area at the ROM?
So I think diversity and inclusion has always been part of what I've done, basically. So even when I was working visitor experience, even when I was working social media and communications, just as part of who I am, I'm always interested in who's not at the table, who's not in the room, who maybe feels that they can't be in the room for whatever reason. So, that was always kind of my mindset coming in. So even when I got the interview to become audience coordinator, that was the mindset I took to the interview. I think they asked like, what would you do? What would be the first few things you would do as audience coordinator? And I said, I'd probably stand at the lobby and watch visitors and chat with them and, chat with staff, find out what's missing, what do visitors wish they could experience in the museum that they haven't experienced, what have staff heard from visitors that have been barriers to them enjoying the museum. So even within that role, I was already thinking from a D&I kind of lens. But to actually be in this role, in this official role, I guess, I have a lot to thank Cheryl Blackman for, because she was the assistant vice president of audience development at the time, and she's since moved on to different museum. But what she was very passionate about community work, very much dedicated to making the museum a place for everyone, no matter where you're from, no matter what your upbringing was. And that was kind of the philosophy she took for how she did visitor experience. So part of her work, of what she's done, was she start the Community Access Network program. In fact, if Trevor, you wouldn't mind playing that 1 minute video that I sent over earlier. It gives a very nice overview of the ROMCAN program and everything that we do.
When I think about what this institution stands for, we care deeply about our ability to engage all audiences in the life of the museum. At the heart of our work and ensuring that we remove barriers to participation of people from all backgrounds is the ROM Community Access Network.
ROMCAN began in 2008, and since that time has welcomed over 800,000 people to the ROM. ROMCAN removes the financial barrier and allows the ROM to partner with community organizations and develop experiences for people who use these organizations. It's a wonderful place, and we want everyone to have access to it.
At the end of the day, it's really through your support that ROM can.
Thank you, ROMCAN.
Thank you, ROMCAN.
So it's, kind of had some of our community partners in there, some of our programs in there, and at a very basic level, the ROMCAN program that Cheryl Blackman started was a way to just give free access to the ROM. Free tickets. You can't afford the museum, come in for free. But it's since grown to working more closely with these community partners to make sure that, when they do come to the ROM, they have a welcome and inclusive experience that meets their needs, I think, but beyond what a museum is usually thought to provide. So I think when people think of diversity and inclusion, people often think of an internal D&I lens, thinking about HR, thinking about staff development. What I do is much more external focused and working on bringing diverse audiences into the museum and making sure that they have an inclusive experience. And that's something that I was fortunate enough to be brought into through Cheryl.
That's, I mean, honestly so cool to hear about. Like I feel like I don't get to hear often about how people found their way into this, or what exactly goes on within the workings of D&I, especially at a museum. Something I know you had mentioned that you didn't really see yourself ending up in museums, or that you came to the ROM and you were so wowed that you were very excited by it. Was there anything specific that you decided to pursue a career in museums for, or was it just that you liked the ROM and you went specifically for the ROM, and it wasn't like a big cognizant, I want to do museums now?
It was something that I thought about in my previous job at the smaller art gallery that I mentioned. And there was a time when I was juggling multiple jobs to make ends meet, and there was that moment of, all right, do I really love this work enough to keep at it, or is it time I finally, grow up and take a quote unquote real job? And I mean, I was privileged enough that I was able to continue doing it for so long. And at that moment, I realized that I could afford to keep doing it a bit longer. So, I think deciding on a career in museums was something that happened when I was already in the midst of it. But my interest in museums started back when I was a teenager. My English teacher had had us study the lyrics to the song "Starry Starry Night" by Don McLean. It's all about Vincent Van Gogh's Starry Night painting, and I think it ends with Vincent Van Gogh. For those who don't know, suicided. Was a brilliant artist. Unfortunately, suicided. Um, and the end of the song said something like, "This world wasn't meant for someone as beautiful as you." And so for an angsty teenager, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this song speaks to me. This painting speaks to me." So that sparked my interest in art, and I got to visit a family friend in New York, I think the year after, and I can't remember now if it was the MoMA or the Met. I'm thinking it's the MoMA that had a copy of The Starry Night by Vincent Van Gogh, and I saw it in person. I'm like, it's a lot smaller than I imagined when I was listening to that song, but it's still really cool that that I see it. So that kind of moment when a work of art touches you, and then you see it in person, it just comes full circle. That was kind of what made me interested in you know in museums in general, and what made me want to start volunteering at the museum as my fun thing. It's because I think growing up, you see whenever you see museums and on TV and movies, you always see either one of two things, right? You see like the really brilliant, nerdy professor who just knows everything about dinosaurs. Or you see like Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman 1984, the really sleek and sophisticated curator who just looks absolutely put together and poised. And neither of those was me, right? So it wasn't something that I saw myself in until I started working in museums and realized how many roles there actually are. The ROM I think has over 400 staff and over 1,000 volunteers, and you know there are the super nerdy brilliant professor types, and there are the super sophisticated curator types, but there are also people like me who love working with communities. There are people who love numbers and work in our finance department, and there are people who work in our visitor experience department or facilities department. People who love putting things together and work in putting exhibitions together. So there was just this whole broad range of opportunities that I wasn't aware of until I started working in museums myself.
Yeah, I think that's like such a kind of good advice wrapped in that of, if you're interested in something, you don't always get like that full perspective of, let's say, museums, theme parks, even of, what exactly, are the cogs behind getting it to work. That was not very grammatically correct, but like volunteering is such like a good first step to actually get, that inside look, the backstage look of, certain things. So yeah, I love that you started out as a volunteer and that just like expedited your passion and your interest within museums. So I think that's super cool. You said that a lot of your work is external facing, which is great. I think public programming within museums and a lot of these like educational spaces is some of the most important work that could be done for, granting access for people that, might not have interest or even, the ability to step inside of these spaces. So your work is amazing, and I'm really happy to see all the things that you're doing, and the video was great. But with D&I external facing, do you also work, with the exhibits that go into the ROM itself and like guaranteeing that, correct language is being used, or even like how diversity and inclusion is being represented within those exhibits?
Yes. So I or another member of the inclusion team is always on the exhibit team. Um, and I wouldn't necessarily say we can guarantee that everything is inclusive, and that's actually I guess you know some a misconception that that I sometimes come across about my role is that people some people look to me as the inclusion expert, as the one who knows everything, and I'd love to know everything, but the reality is, I don't. What I do know is who to ask for help, and what I do have in my toolkit is, I guess, a privilege of having formed these relationships with all of these wonderful community groups who are then happy to offer us their help in providing in these exhibits. So, I think we do have in the presentation, we have some slides of some of the exhibits that we've gone to. And Trevor, I wonder if you could pull up the being Japanese Canadian slides. So yeah, so this is a show we did a couple of years back on Japanese Canadian experience in Canada. After World War II, there were internment camps, and I think it's the same in America that you know Japanese Canadians were discriminated against because of their heritage. Never mind that that many of them were born in Canada, and Canada is their home. So this was a show that we recognized had a subject matter that could potentially bring up painful memories and painful experiences for some of our visitors and you know visitors adjacent, I guess, anyone who came in and see it. So you know we brought in a group of community members to consult on the show and make sure that we are being respectful of their views and and the way that we presented the work. So this show, I should say, actually is works of contemporary art by Japanese Canadian artists, some of whom were second or third or fourth generation, um, responding to experiences of internment. So it's you know Japanese Canadian um, artistic expressions of what their grandparents, their parents went through. It's a beautiful show. I was very moved by that. Early in the video I showed, I think we had someone from Inkwell Workshops saying thank you, Romcan. And Inkwell Workshops is this group here in Toronto that provides creative writing workshops for people with lived experiences of mental health. And they actually became a part of the ROM through this exhibit, being Japanese Canadian, because one of their facilitators, who is herself Japanese Canadian, wanted to bring some of the workshop participants through the exhibit so that it could inspire them to write poetry, fiction, and all sorts of things. So, we provided them with free tickets. We let them walk through the exhibit, and they loved it so much that they were like, "Can you come back and look at your other galleries?" So that was, I think, one way in which that particular exhibition is able to build connections within the Japanese Canadian community, but also outside that and with other communities as well. But yeah, for that show, we had a community consultation, and that's something that my team supports with.
And hearing about how those exhibits were developed hand in hand with just finding new surprises along the way of how you can like integrate them in the future or with the ROM sphere of connections. I'm a little curious. You talk about you're in touch with so many different groups and organizations around the community. How do you end up facilitating those connections, or how do you create those connections?
Well, when I when I started at the ROM, because I was so in awe of the museum, I honestly thought that I wouldn't have to work too hard to build those connections. I thought, oh, everyone's gonna just call me, and I'm gonna, just hand out these free tickets like it was money. Um, but the reality is that you know, like genuine connections is much harder to build, right? So there was a there was a time, I think, when we were celebrating the 10th anniversary of the RomCan program, and we decided it would be fun to get 100 partners for our 10th anniversary. At the time, we had 50 partners, I think. Um, so I just started cold calling all of the community organizations and asking if they wanted to be partners. Um, I think we actually made it. We made it like right on the dot or something. We were able to, go over that 100 partner mark, and once we did, more partners started coming in. But the way I always approach these calls, it's not so much like, you want a free ticket, here you go, have fun. I I asked to speak with someone with decision making power, first of all, because all of our partnerships have a contract that, that basically makes official our commitments to each other, which sounds very stiff and formal, but it's really not. Um, and these calls, I always just start off by asking, here's what we can offer, but what we want to know is what can we do for you? Like, we have the basic part of the agreement, which is that we'll give you free tickets. You will bring your members to the ROM for free. But beyond that, how can we actually take this relationship to the next level? How can we make this partnership meaningful for us and for you? So that's always been a part of the conversations that I've had with new partners. It's a conversation that I have time and again with old partners. And, once in a while, there's an opportunity that comes up that I'm like, oh, this partner would be great for that. But, it all starts with a bit of cold calling and trying to get to the right person who wants what we have to offer. Um, and then after that, it then moves on to more, I guess, relationship building. Once we have the partnership, how can we then keep deepening it? So I think it was a clip in the earlier video as well. Is one example is we have a partnership with boys and girls clubs. So these are after school programs, um, often in elementary schools for children ages 6 to 12 and priority neighborhoods. And, you know, we started off bringing them to ROM, and we decided to pilot one year with one of the clubs, St. Albans Boys and Girls Club, a program that we called ROM in My Backyard, recognizing that for some children, for some neighborhoods, even asking them to come to the museum is itself a barrier. And it would, to build a real connection with these communities, what we needed to do was go out to where they were. So worked with them to set up this program called Round My Backyard, which has since transformed to what we call Round Trailblazers, where we started out bringing staff to these after-school programs to do museum programming um, there, basically, during the Boys and Girls Club's time with the kids. And, it's just been really successful. It started out as I think a 10-week pilot, and then it's been going on for 3 years now, I think. And, thanks to COVID, really, um, we're trying out this new approach where instead of our staff going to the Boys and Girls Clubs to deliver the programming, our staff is instead training the Boys and Girls Clubs to deliver the programming themselves. So, what this does is, first of all, it brings museum programming to kids who may live far from the museum, but it also builds capacity within the communities themselves to deliver museum programming for themselves, right? With the ROM just as a support, being like, here's the resources you can use. Here's a dinosaur bone you can show the kids. So it's that kind of, I think, evolution of partnerships that makes what we do so worthwhile. Um, and then we have partners who just kind of come to us and with ideas. So tomorrow night, actually, we're starting a program called Discover You, which we do with our partner Youth Rising Above. They worked with underserved youth who may be experiencing barriers to employment, and they do skills development programs, they do mentorship programs, and they asked us if we wanted to partner with them. And so what we're doing is we're delivering a hybrid program. It's still skills development, but with a museum twist. So youth, the I guess more traditional skills development parts of the workshop, like here's how to be a good leader, here's how to communicate effectively, here's self-care tips. And then museum staff will then come in and provide a museum perspective on similar programs. So, for this cohort under, leadership, the topic of leadership, we have a curator coming in who will be talking about the changing role of curators from the voice of authority to someone who facilitates conversations. Under communications, we have an interpretive planner who is basically the one who takes the curator's ideas and translates them into into a visitor experience, an engaging, exciting visitor experience. And so this interpretive planner will take the topic of communications and talk about, how that works within an exhibition setting beyond just, because we think communications, you usually think words and, and sounds. Our interpretive planner will I guess expand the definition of communication and talk about how the visuals in a space, how the ambiance of a space, and how the experience leading up to the space all play into the message that's being given about an exhibition. And then for the topic of self-care, I have an Indigenous teacher coming in to talk about the subject of community care and our responsibility to care about the people in our community. So yeah, and I think what I love most about this job really are the opportunities that it's given me. So as an example, I told you I immigrated here from the Philippines, and I became a citizen in 2016. And actually, Trevor, if you could pull up the citizenship ceremony slides. I think this was a year after I became a citizen. I then got to help organize a citizenship ceremony at the ROM, right? So in my head, it felt like a very full circle moment. It was like 1 year ago, I was there taking my own oath. This year, I'm there, working behind the scenes so that other new citizens can take their oath. And I actually just learned last week, I've been invited to give a speech at an upcoming citizenship ceremony. So it's like the ROM has given me this opportunity to kind of go full circle, right? And just this feeling of, I don't know, some being able to be a part of this kind of experience that was so meaningful to me, and being able to give it, to be part of giving it to other people is incredible. Um, and beyond that, I also get to work on these exhibitions that really make me proud of what I do. Because Trevor, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the tattoo slides. Um, so over here in this slide, you see the banner with the banner on the wall. So the image on that banner is, her name is Wang Od, and she's a tattoo artist. She's a Kalinga tattoo artist from the mountainous regions of the Philippines. And I just remember seeing that picture for the first time at the ROM and seeing it as our marketing banner image. Because, I talked earlier about how, as a Filipino, I never really saw myself as working in museums. You know, I got really excited about the Chinese part of my heritage being in the galleries at the ROM, but I never really thought of, I guess, expecting the Filipino side of my heritage to also be represented, which is silly now that I think about it. Um, but then I didn't realize even that I didn't, that I wasn't expecting it until I saw Wang Od's photo. Now, if for those who've been to the exhibition, the actual photo in the exhibit is actually pretty small. It's like the Starry Night moment again, right? Where it's this gigantic immersive experience in your head. Here it's a larger than life photograph on the side of a building. And you see the actual original art and it's tiny. um, but, you know, but this is, I think, the power of this kind of representation. And over here is some more images of the Kalinga tattoo artists. And I saw this in I guess, the garden outside the museum. And, I've been working at the ROM for, I don't know, a year at that point, a few months. And I actually teared up when I saw this display because, not only was my Filipino culture represented in the side of the building, but we have all of these wonderful, badass Filipino women represented in the lawn. And what excited me as an immigrant is that the photographer of this, Jake Versosa, is Filipino himself, and not Filipino Canadian, but Filipino based in the Philippines. So, as someone who never even considered museum work, never even considered this career until I was actually in Canada, the realization that here was this Filipino artist from the Philippines who was being given this opportunity in one of the largest museums in Canada to display his work, and first work to feature Filipino artists in their own right. It was overwhelming, and I was fortunate enough to be able to support in the accessibility of this exhibition, work with the exhibition team on the audio tour. It's a fantastic exhibition. We had so many different tattoos from around the world. And it's not necessarily the kind of exhibition you picture in a museum, right? It's like tattoos are too cool for museums. um, but it turned out great. We had, we brought in, I think this exhibition brought in a very young, diverse demographic, which excited me. We had fantastic displays like this. We can actually see the tattoo art as it's meant to be on someone's arm. And it's just, being part of a team that pulls this kind of thing together. It's mind blowing. It's not something I ever thought of before. And Trevor, actually, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the picture of Zool, thinking about things that I never ever thought of before. In my hands is a 75 million year old fossil of a dinosaur. And it's not a replica, that's the actual fossil. And, this picture was taken in one of the back offices. I think it was the marketing team's office. And I just walked in, I saw this random dinosaur head. And, and I was like, oh my God, that looks really cool. And one of my coworkers was like, do you want to hold a piece of this dinosaur? And I'm like, no, really? And then she gave me this, and I'm like, you have to take my picture. I'm never going to hold a 75 million year old object ever again. And what's really cool, I think, is that, this particular piece, I think they were bringing it out to community places, so that other random people could feel it as well. So it's not like, some of the other pieces in our vaults where, you have to wear gloves, you have to be a curator, or you have to book a special tour to actually see it. This was a piece of prehistory that so many people had the opportunity to see and to touch for themselves. It's it's mind blowing.
I love that photo of you, Jaclyn. You look so happy. But that's really cool. And I love that you brought in those photos too from the tattoo exhibit. And just touching on a few of the things that you were saying, I think museums really do have this special opportunity to, spread awareness for various cultures and showing like a genuine, authentic representation of various cultures and for outside faces, but also for, I'll just speak for myself, like me growing up in Canada, I didn't have, there's a lot of like split personalities, psychology going on when you grow up in the diaspora, right? Like, am I Asian enough? Am I Canadian enough? Am I American enough? Different things like that. So even seeing like yourself represented in these museums is really cool. And even getting the chance to like learn more about your culture that maybe like you didn't learn in school, and seeing more of just representations of yourself and like becoming more passionate about your culture is something that I've experienced in various exhibits and various museum spaces. So I don't know, I think the ROM does really great work with, showcasing very diverse cultures and things like that. And if you're ever in Toronto speaking to the audience, like the ROM is a really, really great experience. And it is great to see that there are so many different things done over there. I know it's closed right now, unfortunately. We are living in these unprecedented times, but when the ROM does open back up, I highly suggest to everyone to go check out what they do over there. But I also wanted to touch on some of the other things that you said too, Jaclyn, about how you work with various organizations and various groups. You were saying, with the Boys and Girls Club, you try to make it a genuine relationship and build that on, a foundation of not just having them come in one time and ticking that box and say, okay, on to the next thing. You actually like have this long lasting relationship and learn to find ways how to, build each other up throughout your time together and different things like that. So I thought that was really great advice, for organizations that are trying to foster these relationships with others as well. I was wondering if you had any more advice for, maybe organizations or even companies who are looking to broaden their, D&I departments or growing these committees. If you had any advice for them as to how to move forward and, build those genuine relationships.
Yeah. I think, it helps to start with a very clear objective of what you want to accomplish, a very clear idea as well of what you're able to provide. So, in my work, I work with communities who have historically um, been disenfranchised by institutions like museums, right? Institutions that tokenize certain communities for, I don't know, whatever points, and then are done with them. So it's something that's always on my mind when I start this work is, I should never promise anything that I won't be able to back up. And that's something that I would definitely suggest for any company out there who is, has decided to embark on D&I work, is that if you say you're going to do it, right? And be very clear with the people that you're talking to about what you're able to do and what you're willing to do. Because, it's very easy, and I was guilty of this myself when I started, to promise the moon when, you're on Earth. You can promise, like, I don't know, trees and flowers, right? Like, and the thing is, if you go to someone and ask them to trust you and say, I can give you the moon, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, I can't, it's gonna take a lot longer to build the trust back. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is to talk to people. Like I said, a lot of my work was cold calling and is following up and thought and just calling people over and over again, and having these long conversations about what will make the museum meaningful for them. Um, I said also when I started at the ROM, I think one of the first things I did was talk to other staff and ask, what gaps have you noticed with audiences? So I think that there's a lot of information out there, and a lot of people are willing to talk. It's just taking the time to to listen to what they have to say, and keeping expectations clear, and then actually implementing what you promised you do. I should
Sorry, go ahead.
I should also add that I work in the inclusion department, and there are companies who have a DAI committee and all of that. But DNI is not the work of one person, one department, one committee, right? It should be something that leadership embodies. It should be something that everyone else in the organization is committed to doing as well. Because I couldn't do the work I do if not for for all my wonderful coworkers who support what I do and who are you know who help out in the community programs that I organize, who help facilitate the big community groups that I bring into the museum. I can only do, it's really so many of my coworkers at the ROM who make this work possible. And if you don't have that, if you think that, DEI work will stay within this one committee and the DNI problems will be solved by this one committee, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice because I don't know, I think what we're seeing, in this past year is, D&I is this trendy thing and people are starting to build these departments within their companies or have these volunteer committees, for certain things. And when you put all that weight on one person or one committee, that's not the most productive way to do it. So yeah, I love hearing that advice from you, Jaclyn. Thanks a lot. Sorry, Rachel, I know you had a question.
Oh, no worries. I think it is really what you're saying about keeping your word and keeping your promises to these other organizations and groups. I think that ties really well back into what you're saying about building those genuine bonds instead of just, oh, we know each other. Here's this built trust that we have from all of these things that we've done together. Because when I said that we would have this event, we followed through on our word. You've talked so much about all of these moments that you didn't expect before. I don't know if there's an easy way to distill your favorite thing about your work down to one thing, but is there?
I think it's the people. I get to work with so many incredible people at the ROM, but also, with my community partners, with our community partners, I should say, who are really, so many of them are so generous with their time and their expertise. I sometimes get a question about an exhibit. How do we make XYZ accessible to this audience? And I call on one of the community partners and like, bam, here's the answer. And that's I'm I'm just very grateful for that generosity of spirit that I've seen. Um, Partly because it helps me do my job, but also partly because it it reminds me that I do this work within a much broader community. So whenever one of my coworkers says, "Yeah, I'll help you with this project," or whenever a community partner comes up to me and it's like, "Can we do this together? I thought of the ROM to do this." Um, it makes us work makes us work very not lonely, right? And it's it's a whole community of people coming together enjoying museums, and sharing in these experiences and sharing, I don't know, resources and building all these relationships. So that's, that's not quite a distillation to one thing, but that's what I love the most.
Yeah, I feel like teams can definitely, be that driving force and help be that motivation as to, doing the work and seeing these things through. So that's really great to hear that you have a great team behind you at the ROM.
And outside the ROM, sorry.
Oh yeah, definitely. um, Speaking about the ROM specifically, we just had another question of, just hearing about all this wonderful work that you've been doing, and thanks so much for sharing all these photos and these stories. But looking into the future, just what other opportunities are you hoping to provide within your department at the ROM, or even branching outside and different things like that?
Yeah, well, my department's actually working on this really exciting project right now. Um, that's funded by the Ministry of Art and Culture and Tourism. I am so sorry, I'm forgetting the full ministry name, but from the Republic of Korea, and we're doing trilingual audio tours, four for permanent galleries and a museum highlights tour, and these tours are going to be released online in English, French, and Korean. So, that's something that I'm very excited about. I'm working on, I'm looking at the scripts so far, and they're fantastic. They really animate the galleries. We have a tour of the Korean gallery, which really excites me. Um, and that's something that's coming up. I think also, because of the pandemic, um, folks are starting to do a lot more programming online. So that's another opportunity that we've tapped into. And so, our team is doing working with other museum staff and volunteers to do these virtual engagements with community partners. So, whereas pre-COVID, we were able to go out into community spaces and deliver programming in those spaces. Um, during this year, we're doing it virtually, and we have I don't know, about 10 events lined up this summer with various community partners. Um, one of them is Baycrest that I'm really excited about. A they they are they work with seniors in the community who may experience barriers to going to museum because of health reasons, and we're gonna be providing them with museum stories and museum inspired activities. So those are coming up.
That's cool. That's super cool to hear. And I mean, I hate to say that there's, silver linings to a global pandemic, but, a lot like through this past year, we've just seen TETV itself, all these digital spaces open up, and it's just added a lot to accessibility and kind of, finding these communities that, often get overlooked and granting them access to various things because of the digital world that we live in now. And we are now learning how to exist and, have these types of shows and conversations and opportunities in a digital space. So I think that's really cool that you all are continuing that. And I know, unfortunately, Canada is still, or Ontario at least, is still on lockdown for the foreseeable future. So, so it's great to see that you're continuing finding ways to connect with the community in various ways. So that's really great. I had another question just about your role itself, and we kind of touched on this a little bit before. Of these D&I opportunities and roles are popping up, and it's a career for a lot of people now to work within diversity and inclusion. So I was just wondering if you had like any advice for folks who are passionate about D&I and want to end up as a manager or a diversity and inclusion officer in their teams or anything like that.
Um, I would suggest take care of yourself, which it sounds, which sounds kind of obvious, but it's something that I think people, especially people who get into this line of work, sometimes don't think about, right? Because, um, when you talk about diversity and inclusion, it sometimes feels like there are all these systemic barriers in the way, and there are all these, you know, all these, I don't know, realities in our world that all the work we do can only dent the slightest bit. And, that kind of, that can be discouraging at times, and, it can be tempting to just keep pushing and keep working harder and harder. But, but then that's how you get burnt out, right? So I learned in my career that, you need to be able to separate yourself and your work from the rest of your life. Um, and then that kind of separation will protect your own mental health, as well as make you better equip you to do the work that you do.
Thank you so much for speaking to all. Like, something that I appreciate is the authenticity and the genuine appreciation you have for showcasing these exhibits and cultures. I think it makes that much bigger of an impact on guests and visitors when you can feel there was the history that went into assembling this exhibit, or to connecting with different artists who are Japanese Canadian, and hearing their stories. I think that just adds richness and fullness to the exhibit that really makes it such a immersive and transformative event or experience for people to go to.
Yeah, it's great. We have an exhibit coming up this summer, after lockdown ends, um, on Wales, and we had an exhibit, and I've seen the plans for this exhibit, and it's just super immersive. You're talking about immersive experiences, this exhibit just has so many things to engage with, like tactile things, sound things, visual things, and that's really, as somewhat from an inclusion lens, at least, that's what I look for in exhibit experiences. You know, is how many different ways can people engage with this content? And the ideal for me is to have a broad range. So you're not walking into the gallery space and all you can do is, everything is visual. But rather you walk into gallery space and you can actually feel objects. You can listen to an audio tour. You can listen to whale song. And, it's just thinking about all of the ways in which a broad diversity of visitors engage with museums. The ROM brings in over 1 million people every year, and so that's over 1 million different ways that people enjoy museums. And my goal really is to make sure we hit as many of those 1 million plus that we can.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'm really excited to see, just how museums continue to evolve and find different ways to, make the visitor experience more either immersive or, uplift that storytelling, but intertwined with that also, accessibility and finding ways that, we can have more tactile experiences or even more auditory experiences and things like that. I think is really exciting. So that sounds like an awesome exhibit, and whales actually happen to be my favorite animal, humpback whales specifically. So I'm excited to learn more about that. That sounds super cool. But we are coming up upon the hour mark, so we do want to be respectful for everyone's time here. Jaclyn, I don't know if you have any, parting words of wisdom you want to share with our audience. If you want to share, these final words before we do say goodbye.
If you're ever in Toronto, come by and visit the Royal Ontario Museum. It's, just walking into the Chinese gallery, walking and seeing the tattoos, the Filipino artist in the tattoos exhibit wowed me. And for anyone watching, I'd love for you to have that kind of experience. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Agreed. The ROM is great, and it is a staple if you ever do visit Toronto. So I ditto to everything that Jaclyn just said. But thank you so much, Jaclyn, for sharing your story with us, sharing all of these great resources with us, and telling us just a bit more about the work that you do. Diversity and inclusion is very important within these spaces and carried on within themed experience itself. So I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing more about yourself here, especially during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So really happy we got to speak with you for this past hour here. We do have some exciting things coming up this week here at TETV. Let's see, we have Mental Health Action Day is on May 20th, and we are having a special that night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Definitely check that out. And there has been a bunch of fun and great programming this past month as well. So definitely check out more on our YouTube channel. But that's all from us at TETV tonight. Thank you everyone for joining in. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Bye.